Okay.
And you are live.
Good evening, everyone. Welcome to our April 22nd meeting of the Chiefs Advisory Committee. As always, I appreciate, or as always, as we've been able to be together so far, I appreciate everyone coming together in this virtual format, certainly as we still navigate all of the concerns and precautions related to the ongoing response to the coronavirus pandemic. Thank you for coming together today, and because we always have a full agenda, we'll jump right into it, and I'll turn the meeting over to our co-chairs, Judge Dwayne Maynard and Ms. Ajmeri Hawk.
Thank you, Chief. Good evening to everyone who is on the line tonight. I want to echo thanks for being available and being a part of the Chiefs Advisory Committee. We call it the CAC now. It's always amazing the amount of things that happen that are relevant to the discussions that we're having as a CAC between meetings. Last month, we had issues involving hate as to our Asian American community. This month, we are on the back end of a verdict entered in the Derek Chauvin case, which is involving George Floyd back in May of 2020. It's hard to believe that it's been that many months. And even in the wake of the verdict, we have other incidents that have occurred involving police-involved shootings that are germane to the discussions that we're going to have, and even the topics that we have on the agenda, including body-worn cameras. So it's good to be back amongst this group. It's good to continue to have the dialogues that, and the difficult discussions, quite frankly, that we all believe are necessary to help build the relationships that we want between the different communities in Dublin and our police department. So that's all I have to say in terms of welcome and thanks for being here. Oh, thank you, Rebecca. Thank you, Becky Metcalf, for all of the work that you continue to do on behalf of the CAC and in preparation of tonight's meeting. So I always have to say that. Ajmeri, any comments that you would like to make before we move on?
Your Honor, I will reserve my comments for the new business leader. Thank you.
Okay, very good. Thank you. We are going to start off with attendance. And Chief, you're always good helping me with this. So if you can let me know who's here on behalf of the department, and also if you could call the roll for the committee.
Yes, sir. I'll call the roll. Judge Dwayne Maynard.
Present.
Ms. Ajmeri Hawk.
Here.
Ms. Yenling Yin.
Present.
Ms. Susan Ortega.
Present.
Mr. Imran Malik.
Present.
Mr. Isao Soji.
Present.
Ms. Stella Vialba.
Present.
And Judge, as regards the members of the committee, I do believe we've received correspondence from Mr. Cameron Justice and Ms. Courtney Ingram, who were going to be unable to attend this evening. And I did not see on the board yet Dr. Sri Gadam present for this evening's meeting, but otherwise everyone else is in attendance from the committee.
All right, very good.
Attendance on our end, Judge. Lieutenant Tabernick is with us this evening. Director Somerville is manning the live stream this evening and with us. Certainly our PIO, Rebecca Myers, and our admin specialist, Becky Metcalf. Lieutenant Latanzi will not be able to join us today. He's actually covering an HOA meeting elsewhere this evening. And Corporal Howard, I saw log in this evening, and Officer McCloskey are here as well on our end. In addition, for our presentations tonight, on the CLO presentation, Corporal Morris has joined us. I did see Officer Scott Nicholson has joined us this evening, as well as Officer McCloskey. Officer Quintanilla was unable to attend for the CLO discussion tonight. He is actually teaching a class this evening. And then finally, for our body-worn camera presentation, our supervisor over the program, Corporal Jay Stelgord, I do believe is with us this evening as well.
All right, great. Thank you for that, Chief. And just before we move on, we want to wish CAC member Courtney Ingram the best of luck tonight in her quest to secure her master's. I want her to know that her voice will also be missed, however, but we certainly understand that completing that coursework is the basis of a dream come true. So good luck, Courtney, and we look forward to having you back with us at our May meeting. And also good luck to Cameron tonight. His endeavor is a little different, but it's in support of the Sales Middle School. So we want to wish him good in that coaching endeavor. Next on the agenda would be the review of the amended minutes. Going to ask if everyone's had the opportunity to review the amended minutes and if there is any discussion or concern or corrections that have been found that need to be made. If there are no concerns, and I will tell you again that Becky and I went over them pretty thoroughly. So I don't think anyone will have any problem following the minutes from the last meeting. And because of that, I would entertain a motion to accept the amended minutes from our March meeting.
I move to accept the amended minutes from our March meeting.
Thank you. Would there be a second?
I second.
Thank you. Imran, good to see you too, by the way.
Good afternoon. Good evening.
All right. It has been properly moved and seconded that the minutes as amended from our March meeting be accepted. All in favor, if you would just say aye.
Aye.
I'll say
Aye.
Aye. Aye.
thank you. Any objections? Very good. The record will reflect that the amended minutes from our March meeting have been accepted without objection. We'll move into old business now. Is there any particular old business that needs to be addressed at this time? I did want to offer Yang Ling the opportunity to provide any update that she might want at this time as it relates to the discussions that we had during our March meeting, and any activity or response that has come from the community in the aftermath of that discussion. Yangling.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Judge, for giving me this opportunity. A lot has happened since our March meeting. On that weekend, we actually had a rally. Imran was there as a speaker, all the communities coming together, and we had hundreds of people showed up from all different races. We absolutely see the support. And Cheif was there with his family, and maybe some other members were there. I just didn't know. So really appreciate all the support all around. And it was a great event that we come together to stand in solidarity against the anti-Asian hate. And that's only one of the highlight. And after that, we also have our community members participating in the hiring and onboarding process of the Dublin school, the DEI superintendent. And there is another event in planning in Dublin on the May 5th. Maybe we'll talk offline to see whether someone from our department, Dublin Department, Police Department can join our event. And there are many other events on speaking up on social media, as well as in the companies people are working for. And we see absolutely people sharing their story, sharing their experience. If you remember last time I shared, I didn't feel personally being attacked or anything like that. And I went back to have a conversation to really think about what happened to me. And I had some new observation, even about myself. Am I living in the bubble, a bubble that I built myself, my family? And I had a candid conversation with my own kids. And we actually discovered they were called racial slur even just recently, while this all happening when my child was riding bikes. Even in Dublin, where I think everything is like rosy, right? So it's absolutely a consciousness awareness for every single us to know that the racism does exist and it's real. Even in Dublin, there works for all of us to do. So there's, and absolutely, I think this is we take this crisis as an opportunity for us to build a stronger community. So thank you for allowing me to share that.
Absolutely, and thank you for sharing it, Yangling. I um didn't know that. What was the date of the rally?
It's March 20th.
Okay. And Imran, since you were a speaker, any comments that you might have following up on what Yingling shared with us?
Thank you, Judge. Yes, just a quick, brief follow-up. In regards to what Yang just mentioned, there are a lot of great efforts that are underway all over, the state of Ohio. The Asian American Commerce Group, which is an Asian American community-driven, business platform, they are doing a lot of work with, not only the Asian-specific minorities, but also other ethnicities from Asia as well, to bring the systematic racism and social justice issues to light. There are a lot of other events coming up in the pipelines. Vincent Wong and Sam Shim, who is also an elected official on the Upper Arlington School Board, or sorry, Worthington School Board, and they are actually spearheading some of these local talks. And I do believe there's a commitment from the city of Dublin, as well as Cheif. I just read an email that your name was also in the commitment, that there will be an event here coming up. I think sometimes early May. Trying to bring the community together. In addition, there is a National Day of Prayer on May 6th, which has been kind of observed nationwide ever since the Reagan administration. So our interfaith partnerships, as well as cultural partnerships, are doing a lot of over a lot of talk and panel discussions all over the central Ohio, including some in Dublin as well. There will be a City of Columbus driven Community Relation Commission driven panel discussion with Carl Smallwood and Nancy Rogers and a couple of other Columbus Bar and OSU Law School deans, conversation around the divided community concept. We have been working on that project for last 4 years in collaboration with not only the Central Ohio, but nationwide communities which have seen the impacts and tragedies of hatred and social justice inequalities. We have driven and model some of the models to build community resilience. And it took us 4 years to create all those models and framings, and now we are in the process of rolling them out. A lot of the Rotaries around Ohio, a lot of nonprofit organizations are already collaborating to adapt those models from us. So we will be working that again in conjunction with the Ohio State Law School as well as Columbus Bar Association in the upcoming months. So again, a lot of great work, which unfortunately often at times does not get the spotlight, but it is happening as well. So, and there was also a vigil that the Dublin Kaufman Progressive students did in Dublin a week after the event on March 20th. It was done at the bridge. The chief was there, and Mary was a speaker on that platform as well. It went pretty well and got a lot of positive feedback, not only from the community of Dublin, but also the city officials as well. And there's definitely a lot of appetite and a lot of focus to kind of bring these collaborative initiatives under one synergy. So
Super.
thanks.
Thank you. Ajmer, you're still going to save your comments now that we know that you were
I'll save it. Thank you.
okay. Chief, anything then that you wanted to say?
Judge, I just appreciate the ongoing engagement from the members of the advisory committee. Certainly, when we brought this group together, our hope was that, just as Imran mentioned, that there would be synergy among the members here for us to have better awareness of events where we can be good community partners, and for us to spark ideas ourselves in how we reach out and proactively engage in the future. So that has given us the opportunity not just to be present, but to be supportive, to be an active voice in partnership with the members of the committee and the communities that are represented here as part of the committee. So thank you for that continued engagement. And I would encourage you, please continue to bring those opportunities to our attention so that we can be there and stand with you in everything we can do to support from our perspective as a police department.
Hey,
Yes.
Judge, am I allowed to add just maybe one comment?
Yes, for sure.
Because Chief is talking, so it reminded me it happened almost like too long ago, but it's really just a few weeks ago. A lot of officers from Dublin Police called us personally, which is very touching. I'm telling you, we shared with our community, and we are being reached out and asking us how we are feeling. So thank you for doing that for the community. Thank you very much.
And that certainly is consistent with our hope that out of this there will be much more community engagement. So that's great to hear. Community engagement by the police department. So it's good to see that that's already in motion, or hear that it's in motion. All right. Well, thank you. Thank you all for sharing with the committee what has been going on. And then we'll move into the chief's update to the committee at this point in time. And one of the things that's not on here, Chief and Esau, is an update from the community task force. So, Chief, as you touch on the different update items, please make sure that that one is addressed as well.
Absolutely, Judge. And as I am prone to do, as you found out, there are bullets that are on the agenda, and there's some other pieces that I remembered as we got ready for the meeting this afternoon. We want to make sure we highlight for the members of the committee as well, because they are good progressions of our continued partnership and information that the members of the committee have brought to our attention. So I'll hit upon that piece, Judge, and the connectivity to the community task force, and then let Esau jump in with any other items I might forget. But we did forward some information this afternoon from Rebecca to the members of the committee. They were presentations that were part of our discussion at the community task force level on Tuesday, and one of which was a presentation from the city manager's office on demographics in the city of Dublin. And I know that that was a conversation or question for members of the committee early in what the community looks like from the perspective of our demographic breakdown. And then so there are a couple of slides within that PowerPoint presentation, and then an additional PDF document that were presented as part of that continuing conversation with the community task force on Tuesday. We don't have to get into all the details of those documents today, but we wanted to make sure we provided that information. And thank you to Judge Maynard for suggesting we forward that information, give everybody an opportunity to digest, and it becomes a resource for us to refer to as we have continued conversation about practices that we have at the police department that are informed by city population and demographics in our analysis of our activities. And then also it helps inform maybe sometimes the information that we use to gauge our activities against, and then the other pools of data that we pull together as part of our analysis, as well as we have continued conversation in the future. And Esau, if I missed anything from the task force perspective or as it relates to those documents, I'll certainly be happy to let you fill in anything that I may have missed.
Thank you, Chief. I think about the only thing that I would add to that is a little bit of discussion that we had on a potential ordinance that may come in front of Dublin City Council at some point on LGBTQ plus community. Such ordinances have been discussed and I suppose passed also in some communities around Central Ohio, the latest of which is making its round in Hilliard at the moment. And a report was made at the task force meeting. Dana shared with us that that is being watched very carefully by Dublin to see how that goes in Hilliard, and also to observe how once the ordinance such as that gets passed, how that gets executed and what type of support is necessary to really stay true to the spirit of such ordinance. There was also a letter that was submitted to the task force by a community member whose child is a member of LGBTQ plus community. And I believe that added to the discussion to have an actual, I don't want to use the word example, but an actual a case where such an ordinance can make a difference in somebody's life right here in Dublin. So that was a conversation that we had. I just wanted to add that to the report today. Thank you.
Lisa, can I ask a question about that? Is that the anti-discrimination bill that's in front of Hilliard City Council that you're mentioning? Like the housing and work and all of that for members of the LGBTQIA community that's not protected under federal law right now. Is that right?
That is correct. That is currently not protected class in the state of Ohio. And therefore, certain local municipalities are having to go their own way in order to protect the LGBTQ plus community. And if it were to come in front of Dublin, and it did sound like, and this is my personal observation as opposed to what Dana said, but it did sound like it is going to come at some point, that it would be a fairly extensive ordinance where it is going to cover not just the certain, say, employment type of discrimination, but also such as in housing that, as Mary, you mentioned. So stay tuned. I think it is likely going to come up for a discussion in the Dublin City Council relatively soon.
I just wanted to clarify, there's already several cities who've passed them in Ohio, correct? About 30 or so. Isn't that accurate? So are we waiting? I guess this is more of a question you can take to the task force. Are we waiting to see Hilliard specifically do this, or can we use the examples of the other 30 municipalities that have passed it already to kind of go off of that?
Yeah, I didn't mean to suggest that we were waiting to see, Hilliard, well, what Hilliard is doing, just so that we can follow them. I don't believe that was the case. Hilliard just happens to be the latest city that has taken it up. I believe Westerville, Worthington, those are the cities that have already passed those ordinances. And my understanding is that all of them have been getting studied very carefully by the city of Dublin. It's one thing for large cities like Columbus to pass that. They tend to have more resources to back that up, not just to pass it, but actually have the resources to enforce them. And it is somewhat different for smaller cities such as the suburban communities. So Dublin, I believe, is being rather observant before just jumping in to pass something, but to do it in the right way. That is the impression that I got.
Thank you, Esau. Any other questions for I or Esau about the community task force meeting?
I did have a question about the demographic breakdown. Are we using the numbers from 2018, 2019? Because I don't believe the 2020 census numbers are released yet, correct?
That's correct. Yes. So we do not have that the updated census information yet. That's correct.
Okay, I just wanted to verify. Thank you.
No, that's a great clarifying question. Thank you, Esau. Appreciate the update for sure. So Judge, just continuing on with my list of things before I forget to check them off that didn't make the agenda. Just wanted to give everyone an awareness and give our communications and public information and our PIO, Rebecca Myers, credit for getting our website up and running. So the updated website is now live and active with all of the feedback that we have received from the committee incorporated, including some updated photographs and some information that is been developed on our end to help answer some of the questions that we've had here in our discussions as a committee, and also questions and conversations that we've had from members of the public. So that is now live. So just wanted to make everyone aware. And if you get a chance to log on to our website, take a look at that resource. Certainly always accepting feedback on what we might add to help give clarity to our community on what we do here in Dublin, why we do it, and who we are as an organization. Another piece of progress for us as an organization, something we've mentioned in the past, our Commission on Accreditation for Law Enforcement Agencies, our Year 3 assessment was completed last week, and that is the assessment of both our communication center as an accredited communication center and our police department as a law enforcement accredited organization. So that was completed last week, and the report is sent forward then to CALEA, which will be a reflection of their look at our files over the last year for Year 3, and all indications we are compliant in all of the standards that we are required to have, not just policy for, but proof of our follow through on that policy. It was an excellent, again, review of our practices by CALEA last week. At the end of this year in November, I believe, is our on-site assessment for our Year 4 assessment, meaning they will send assessors to the department to come and have some conversation with members of our organization, take a look at our facility and our equipment, our training practices, and our documentation, and really get to have conversations directly with members of our department, as well as an opportunity for members of the community to weigh in and give feedback for that process. Frankly, in years past, we've struggled a little bit to get input from the public and feedback from the public as when we have the assessors here. So I'm advising the committee today just to give you some advance notice that we will again remind everyone when those dates are finalized that we will have assessors available and an opportunity for you to share your feedback and perspective with our CALEA assessors to help inform their report about our agency as part of our 4-year cycle for accreditation for the organization.
Chief,
Yes, sir.
before you move on, could you share with the community partners more about what Khalil is? Because there's a lot of discussion now about national, no national policy on policing and all of that kind of thing. And I think that it would help all of us and anyone who's tuned in to understand uh, what Khalil is and its role in uh, policing, whether it's regional, local, or national in scope.
Judge, that's a great question. Yeah, I can give you a quick overview, and I'll ask Director Somerville to jump in as well as our resource over our CALIA process or over our accreditation process. And what I would offer is, as well as if in a future when we have a meeting, when we have space, to bring our accreditation manager back to talk specifically about that process leading up to our on-site, so that the committee can have an informed perspective as they may want to provide some commentary and reflection on our organization to our CALIA assessors in the fall. But to answer your question, CALIA is the Commission on Accreditation for Law Enforcement Agencies. It is an international accreditation because it does extend to some countries beyond the U.S. It is an independent third-party assessment of our organization that has a board and commission that, again, establishes best practices in our profession. So they are able to, because they assess other law enforcement agencies across the country and sometimes outside of the U.S., they're able to sort of gather information and continue to push forward our profession by identifying progressions and best practices. And we've talked about this before, so that we're not stuck with those sort of traditional practices or past practices, but that we're looking for what are the best practices in our industry. And part of that is them establishing standards that we have to comply with, writing policy that complies with those standards, and then taking a look at our ability to prove that not only do we have policy, but we follow that policy as an organization. So it is not a required accreditation for law enforcement agencies, but is one that we have had a long history and partnership with. We've been CALIA accredited for over 30 years now. So this we are seeking what will be our 10th accreditation from CALIA when we have the assessment in the fall. But again, if I've missed anything, I'll ask Director Somerville to jump in. But that's a very quick overview of our CALIA process. I would love to have a time in a future meeting to actually have a full discussion of that process as we get closer to our on-site accreditation in the fall. Director Somerville, if I've missed anything, please, or if I've misspoken in any regard, certainly, please feel free to correct me.
No, Chief, that's a great overview of CALIA. Just the only other thing I would point out, more than 400, I lost track, but it's more than 447 standards covering all aspects of law enforcement operations, not just from use of force, patrol operations, investigations, but HR, hiring, and the overwhelming majority of the standards are mandatory standards. So in order to be CALIA accredited, you do not have, it's not a case of just meeting the majority of standards. You must be compliant with every mandatory standard. There are a few optional standards that may or may not apply to a specific agency because they don't perform a certain function. But if you do perform that function, you must be compliant with the standards. And that's what certainly brings a lot of credibility to the CALIA seal when it is bestowed upon an agency.
Thank you again for the question, Judge. And certainly, if we have the space in a future meeting, would love to find some time on the agenda to have that presentation as well. The other, just very quickly, before I get to the bullets that are actually on the Chief's update, the Unity Against Hate event, we have, and Lieutenant Tabernick actually had conversation this afternoon with Mr. Vincent Wong from the Asian Pacific Islander American Public Affairs Association and the Ohio Chinese American Association. They are planning an event on May 15th. Right now, we are tentatively planning at Kaufman Park. but our event staff in the city of Dublin, as well as our community liaison officers and our administration and department will be involved in supporting that event. We look forward to being able to be partners for that event in the near future here in May. We will certainly send out information to the members of the committee as we finalize date, location, and time, and certainly hope that as we've shared in the past, if you can fit it into what I know is your very busy schedule, love to see you there as part of the event and in support as well. And the last off agenda item I wanted to share and just again give credit and thanks to Imran for reaching out to us and coordinating a meeting for the lieutenants and I to attend in meeting the leadership of the Ohio Care Office in Hilliard, moving to a new office in Hilliard here recently. They invited us down to have some conversation with their executive staff, and it's the Council on American Islamic Relations, the Ohio chapter. So we were able to have lunch a couple of weeks ago and talk through what I hope are some exciting partnerships with the care staff between us as a police department, us as a city, and then also involving Hilliard and their city staff as well. The deputy chief from Hilliard was present, as well as the city manager from Hilliard, and then council member Jane Fox also attended the meeting with us as well. So thank you to Imran for reaching out to us and providing that opportunity for, again, us to build some connectivity and excited about some future partnership and support there as well. And then moving on to our agenda items, I'll ask Rebecca to pull up our first slide. So last week was National Public Safety Telecommunications Week. And certainly, as you are well aware, we have a consolidated dispatch center and a very large contingent of communication technicians that serve not just the city of Dublin, but also Worthington, Upper Arlington, and Hilliard. And so just want to recognize and again acknowledge as part of the meeting today our wonderful staff in NREC, who are our public service answering point for, again, a number of communities and a lifeline for us in public safety to be able to get the right resources to be able to keep our community safe. And so just some highlights from NREC that we presented as part of our information update to the Public Services Committee earlier this month. So new in our NREC supervisory staff, Stephen Meddy, who is our operations manager, actually joined us from the Worthington Police Department and is now the operations manager for our consolidated communication center. And we also promoted some supervisors into new positions within the center as well recently. Our communication managers, Lauren Yankinen, Stephanie Skipworth, and Amy Hager will be our communication managers of our center moving forward. And then we promoted 3 additional supervisors as well. Our communication supervisors new to that position are Jennifer Kane, Katie Edwards, and Matt Robbins, who will be helping us lead that group of members in our communication center. And then I just left a bullet point there, so I would remind myself to talk about the CALIA on-site in the future as well. So, but congratulations and thank you to our telecommunicators for all that they do for us each and every day as that lifeline for our community and for our officers and firefighters and medics in all the communities that they serve. Also wanted to give a quick update, and Lieutenant Tabernick is going to jump in and give an overview of Senate Bill 18. This was legislation that was enacted at the beginning of the year and actually went into effect on April 12th, if I remember right. So just last week, and I'll let Lieutenant Tabernick give an overview of what that legislation means and our efforts in making sure that we are, again, compliant with everything we're required and the changes in our industry and providing training for our staff.
Thanks, Chief, and good evening to all the members of the Chiefs Advisory Committee and everybody else watching. The CALIA piece that Director Somerville and Chief Price talked about was actually a pretty good segue into this. And when we talk about ensuring that we are instituting best practices at all times, being informed of legislation, and ensuring that we're protecting our citizens and serving them using those best practices, we just wanted to give an example of a new law. And Chief, you're correct. April 12th was the effective date. Senate Bill 18 went into effect, and it, for those that are interested, it affects the new Ohio Revised Code 2901.10 and Ohio Revised Code 2152.75. And what it specifically deals with is the restraint or confinement of pregnant women or pregnant juveniles who are charged or convicted of a crime. And so the why behind this specific legislation was recognizing that pregnant females and those that are going through postpartum as well may be at increased risk of harm while they're restrained or confined. So that is recognizing that was the reason that this law went into place. So I'm going to give kudos to my colleague, Lieutenant Latanzi, who oversees, as you guys know, our tactics team. And then one of our tactics members, Corporal Dalgord, and you met Corporal Stoll a couple last meeting actually. They worked very quickly once this, prior to the bill actually going into effect or law going into effect, to make sure that we're informed on what this means for us and make sure that we're training our officers to keep up with these legal standards. I won't go into all the intricacies of the law, but essentially pregnant females can only be restrained or confined if there's an emergency. So if they pose a serious threat to persons or property, that's the only way that they can be confined. So when we're talking about what we would do predominantly, you're talking about handcuffing. That's how we would restrain somebody. And in that case, if it does meet an emergency circumstance, a serious threat to someone, we would handcuff them in front. And the thought behind that would be that if that female were to fall, they could brace themselves with their hands in front. Again, keeping in mind that they could be at increased risk because they are pregnant, and obviously the child that they have with them could be at an increased risk as well. So that's just a little overview there of the new law, but it definitely was a good example that we wanted to share of us, recognizing new legislation and making sure that our officers are informed on it, our officers are trained on it, and that we have a policy that addresses it. So we were able to accomplish all those things thanks in very large part to our tactics team by the time that it went into effect on April 12th. I'd take any questions if anyone has any, but again, just wanted to give a short overview of that. Thanks, Chief.
Specifically for this bill, I'm assuming it's obviously pregnant women, right? Like, it's not like they're asking you to just assume that everyone is pregnant. So are you guys waiting for a sign? Are you asking, like, I guess, like, how are you going to put this into practice?
That is an excellent question. I wish I would have covered that. So we are asking, we will ask someone who we plan or are considering restraining. We will ask them, the law requires us to determine if you're pregnant. Are you pregnant, or have you given birth within the last 6 weeks? So that's a great question. We take that, we took that upon ourselves to make sure that we were out in front of that. Again, we're talking about ensuring the safety of members of our community here. So we're going to take that upon ourselves to ask that question when it's not obvious right in front of us. So very good question.
And another question is just based on the discussions that we've had regarding the LGBTQIA community, transgender folks. Again, that's another area maybe that we need to explore about how to approach people who are not obviously female or female identifying, but could be pregnant.
Yeah, I agree. That this law didn't specifically address that, but I definitely understand the impact that you're talking about. So it's definitely something to explore further.
Thank you, Lieutenant. I appreciate you giving the update. And again, yeah, we thought it was good. And thank you for the questions as well as in follow-up, because the legislation came out relatively quickly. It was not something that we had a long trajectory to sort of track, but we wanted to make sure we gave you an example of us being responsive and active in making sure that, again, our officers are in position to be armed with the right information and the right direction and how we're going to make sure that we're compliant with everything that's required of us, and still balancing, again, making sure that we're in position to keep everyone safe, for sure. So thank you for that. And then I will turn it back over again to Lieutenant Tabernick. And we're, in the past, we've been asked about both the school resource officer program and also the community liaison officer. So we thought this was a good opportunity for us to revisit and come back to that topic and give you a little bit of an overview of where we're at with the community liaison officers. And certainly you've heard I'm proud to hear some good reflections of our connectivity from the members of who are in that assignment. And so just want to give you an overview and give you a chance to meet some of those officers tonight.
Thanks again, Chief. So as we work through our school resource officer discussion, it came up a few times that we wanted to ensure that we were clear on the difference between a school resource officer and a community liaison officer. And over a couple of those meetings, we talked about the training that each received, and kind of the mission of both of those units, which can cross quite often because they're within our community education unit. So we just wanted to take an opportunity here to introduce you guys to the difference between the two, and more importantly, show the intent behind what we're trying to do with our diversity, inclusion, and community outreach unit. So we do have Officer Nicholson, Officer McCloskey from our, who are both our community liaisons, and then Corporal Morris, who is the supervisor over our community liaison in our community outreach unit. So I'd ask for Corporal Morris to step in, and he's going to give you an introduction and talk a little bit more about the program.
Good evening. Thank you for the invitation to come to speak today. We have understand there's some confusion, or not really confusion, but some questions about the difference between our things. We're bad in the police department about using abbreviations and acronyms. So you have SRO and CLO, and so CLO is Rebecca, if you can forward the slide.
Excuse me, is it possible to see the corporal? I don't know if we've met.
I'm right here.
Literally met Corporal Morris before. There he is.
Hi. Well, we've met. I actually spoke to you on National Night Out last fall.
Oh, okay.
And I had the pleasure of meeting Ms. Hawk, I'm sorry, at the vigil back at the end of March. So, and Imran I've also met, and so we've met a few of you on different occasions. So, but thank you.
Okay, thank you. And
good to see you
gotta
again.
go back to the screen. That's fine now.
All right. So a little history of our of the unit. It was initially created in 2018, and with the name of the Diversity Inclusion Unit. And so in 2019, late in 2019, we thought that to better align with our department's goals and the city's goals of outreach and engagement, that it was a good opportunity to expand the unit to reflect what we were actually doing and what we were asking our officers to do, the community liaison officers to do, which is to look for opportunities to engage the community, and as well as some of the other tasks that we ask them to do. And so at that time, we expanded the unit, and we added 2 officers and a supervisor dedicated as one of my duties, but to supervision of that unit. So one of the in our policy and our purpose of the unit is the important thing is to bridge a gap between law enforcement and our diverse communities. And so we use those connections and those opportunities to provide training and resources to our officers and resources to our community members. So one of the things that our CLOs do is provide training to our officers, specifically cultural differences that they may experience while they're on patrol. We provide a resource, and each officer makes themselves available. We provide them a cell phone to interact, to make them easy to reach by our community members. The officers that are assigned to this unit are all full-time police officers having a full-time job within the agency. Like Officer McCloskey is a patrol officer, Officer Quintanilla and Officer Nicholson are both school resource officers. So they actually volunteer to do this in addition to their regular assignments. And so all of the community liaison officers are as I said, we're volunteers. And so even though they volunteer, we have a process to make sure we're putting the right person in that position. So the next slide or two will explain kind of what that process is, but the single most important quality we look for are their connection to the community, the thoughts and the needs of the community, and being aware of current trends in our society. So as I said, we made a dedicated effort in the last year and a half for outreach and engagement. And so some examples, well, actually we'll talk a little bit about the training that both we've provided and what we've had our officers complete, is some of them here. And we this past year, we really put a focus on implicit bias. And so that was a good portion of what we expected of our officers this year. However, we're in the process of researching future training, and we welcome any input and suggestions that the committee may have. So feel free to reach out to me or any one of our community liaison officers, and we'd be happy to hear your suggestions. If you have any questions about any of that training, I do have some specifics of who presented those trainings if you need those. So Officer Nicholson, who's with us tonight, was one of our first community liaison officers back when we called them diversity and inclusion officers. And he has been a fantastic resource for me as we've moved forward here. And an example of his leadership within this is how he reached out to members of our Asian community recently, and the response that he got and the efforts that he went through have been nothing short of amazing, and I'm really proud of him. And so I'd like to, if Scott would like to say a couple words about that, I will give him a moment.
Okay. I've got work. Oh. Even what
Scott, we can't hear you.
Sorry.
We can't hear you correctly. Sorry.
Sorry, Scott. We'll come back to you if we can. So some of our recent efforts will come through on the slides. And so one of the things that when we relaunched the unit, we expanded things to, or expanded our focuses on some other areas of our community, one of which was our senior population. And as a result, with our city's community outreach and engagement unit, you see Officer Quintanilla there on the picture, that we last year in 2020 we provided 2,100 meals to senior citizens in our community. We this past fall we worked at the Dublin Food Pantry, and in the picture here you can see Officer Nicholson, Officer Brown, Officer Quintanilla, and Officer McCloskey, and they worked at the pantry, and then we provided some candy and gifts for the folks that were attending for those services. We work with Get Behind the Badge toy drive. It's been we've done it now 2 years, and this year was far more successful than first, and we hope to keep that momentum going this year. We partnered with the Starfish assignment, and that's been one of the things that I've really been pleased about this year. Is one of the things that we got involved with them was the Books and Badges program, and they donated 600 books to us to read to elementary school age children. And you see Chief Price and Lieutenant Tabernick have already read to a couple classes, and that agency is that organization is a multi-jurisdictional agency. They work to promote relationships between the police and their communities. And one of our next projects with them is a bicycle donation to kids in the city at the Columbus City Rec Centers. And so the reason that we thought that was important is we think we're doing the right thing. We're on the right path here in Dublin, and we think that we can make a difference outside of the city of Dublin and be an example for other police agencies to follow. And part of that, so you'll see here on this slide, is that we've reached out with the Bexley Minority Parent Alliance, the City of Bexley Diversity and Inclusion Committee, to try and bring a program similar to what we have to the Bexley Police Department. And so we've had ongoing talks with them, because we think that as I said, what we're doing here, we're on the right path, and we want to expand that outside of our city. We reached out to some of our community members to ask for their input and suggestions on how we could be doing things better, and I think that was fairly successful. And again, you see the information there about the Starfish assignment, and then recently we participated actually attended the vigil for the victims of violence in the Asian community, where I got to meet a few of the committee members there, a couple of the committee members there. So again, we appreciate any input that you might have for us, specifically in regards to training or maybe opportunities for outreach for us. If you have any questions, myself or Officer McCloskey or Officer Nicholson would be happy to answer them. And as mentioned before, Officer Quintanilla couldn't be here. He's actually working with a group to help provide people with disabilities in their interaction with the police, or how to handle emergency situations. So he's busy doing that. So thank you for your time.
Thanks, Corporal Morris. Yeah, I just wanted to highlight that one last piece on there with the bike donation, and Corporal Morris talked about it a little bit, but just a quick shout out. We are doing a bike donation here at the Justice Center on Saturday, May 1st from 10 to noon. So we would ask our community members, if they are able, to bring in either new or lightly used bikes. And we are already linked up with the Starfish assignment, Columbus Police Department, and other police departments around Central Ohio to get those bikes to community members who need them, children who need them. So please consider that if you're able to. And then I also didn't want to miss an opportunity here, Officer McCloskey, if you wanted to say anything about your specific role as a CLO or some of the things that you've been a part of as well. You've been a pretty active member.
Hi, everyone. Good to see you again. Yeah, so a lot of my roles cross paths. So it's helpful to me because I get to interact with a lot of similar minded individuals as far as finding new best practices, figuring out ways to progress our agency and our career field. So I'm a community liaison officer. You just got a great PowerPoint on what that means. I am part of the LGBTQ task force for the city. So ESAL, thank you for bringing up the non-discrimination ordinance. JM and I have been working on that for a little while now, and I'm hopeful that we'll have really good results pushing that. And I think we have a lot of really great people in our corner. The other, I guess those two things, in addition with my role here on the advisory committee, I mean, they all come down to a very similar core function, which is to bridge the gap between law enforcement and the community, to build trust with individuals, to create connections with people, to hear people's experiences, learn from their past, learn where they want us to go, how they want us to serve them as public servants who took an oath to do just that. So, you know, all of these roles are educational for me, but I hope they're also educational for those who I come into contact with. If I can teach them a little bit about our police department and about who we are, while learning about their experiences and their history, then that's what I want to do. But it's been incredibly rewarding and enjoyable these past couple of months. I'm pretty new to all of it, but it's been a lot of fun, and I've just enjoyed meeting all of you.
Thanks, Amber. I guess now would be a good time to open up to any questions or anything that anyone wants clarified.
I have a question. If we could get Officer Nicholson back up.
Okay, can people hear me now?
We can hear
All
you.
right. Corporal Morse, I'd like to take this opportunity to inform you that the speaker or the microphone on my computer or my PD issued laptop does not work. So it'll need addressed, please.
It's good to meet you, Officer Nicholson.
It's great to be here.
I'm curious as to how you see the distinction between the two roles that you have with the department. What are the distinctions between your function as an SRO and your function as a CLO?
Sure. I actually started as a CLO in spring of 2018. Myself and Officer Brown were the two kind of founding members. And if I could thank Imran and Yanling, those two helped us build this program immeasurably, and we wouldn't be anywhere close to where we've gotten with it if it weren't for those two and several others. So thank you very much for just your welcoming and openness and willing to work with us as we kind of stumbled our way as we're getting going. But I was a CLO for several years before I was ever in the schools. I worked patrol on all three shifts over that time. So for me, it's a little easier to distinguish between the two roles. I was glad to be on patrol when we're getting started because I was already out there meeting people on the road, seeing people not just at events or at things we went to, but on calls in person while we're out and about, whether it's on foot or on bike or whatever the case was. But now that I am in the school, it's still distinct, but they're connected as well, because as all of you have learned, I'm sure, through all the discussions with our SRO program, our school district is even more diverse than our general population, just because of how far it branches into not just Dublin, but the surrounding cities. Our district is kind of, it expands beyond our city borders. Um, so now I'm working kind of with these families. I'm assigned to Sells Middle School primarily. So I'm working with these families each and every day, not just the ones that live here in Dublin, but the ones that live in Columbus or other jurisdictions that happen to be in our school district. So I'm glad to have been able to help grow the program and then step into the school role that I am in now, because it's kind of connecting everything and just helping us continue to get the message out there, and reach new people to continue to get input for things that maybe we need to be doing differently or looking into as well.
Thank you. I think part of the reason that I asked the question, in a few minutes, I guess we'll get to a short discussion at least on um, the relationship between the task force and the CAC, and the work that we might be able to do to help them, and it'll tie into that Beaverton plan that we looked at. But one of the things I think that we here in the CAC have been deeply involved and committed to, and our discussion has to do with community outreach and community engagement. And and I'm always wondering how you officers who are out there on the front line are thinking in terms of how you um, expand or push the boundaries of uh, involvement, and particularly now with the issues of diversity and inclusion. And I think that you're in a pretty unique position with the latitude to think outside the box, if you will. And I think that, as we go forward as a um, Chiefs Advisory Committee, that we really try and take advantage of that opportunity to think outside the box and think of different ways of not only engagement or building bridges into the community, but building bridges um, with the police department and with different communities, with different diverse communities within the community, if you know what I'm saying.
One thing I can say about our program, um, I, I hope it's somewhat answered your question. And if Corporal Morris, if you mentioned this and I missed it, I apologize. But since we've gotten started and gotten going, we've worked with um, a couple private entities as well as some of our surrounding agencies who are working to kind of mirror our program. When we first started, we kind of took some cues from Columbus PD, who had a similar program that existed. So we kind of got our starting point, got our footing from how they've operated, and then we just kind of took it in the direction that was best for our community here. But I know we've worked with a citizens committee from Bexley who's trying to get one started with their city government and with their police department. We've spoken a couple of the trainings we've gone to that Officer Brown and I actually went to a few years ago. The trainers were surprised to see police officers there. Um, we kind of just wore business casual. We didn't present ourselves as officers right away because we didn't want the training to be skewed towards us or away from us. We just wanted to receive it as it was. And then, as discussions started and people found out, they were surprised that we were there, but they were kind of thrilled that we were there. And they worked with us a little bit to try to develop training kind of for police departments before that became more of the mainstream thing that it is now. So we're always looking for new ways to impact, I guess, not just Dublin, but all of Central Ohio and as far out as we're allowed to go, I guess.
Judge, if I may just add a comment there to Officer Nicholson and Corporal Morris's statements. Sure. I just want to say that often at time, you probably don't get enough of appreciation and recognition for the work that you do. But from a Islamic community perspective, which is very diverse in both in Hilliard and Dublin, your outreach efforts and your engagement and your participation and presence in various events and activities has definitely carried a lot of weight. And I think it brings just the community closer and builds up level of trust and confidence. So I just want to thank you both for leading that effort and the department itself leading this synergy. So thank you for all that you do. So I appreciate that.
Thank you.
I wanted to
I would like to echo that. Like you mentioned, Officer Nicholson, we have been working together for quite some time. The Chinese community is very familiar with Dublin Police Department, whether it's you or Officer Brown. And so thank you for participating in the community events, and you're always there as part of us. So thank you for the effort.
I just wanted to add how much I'm enjoying listening to all the different things, all the different activities that this particular community liaison is doing in the city of Dublin. And I will also like to take the opportunity just to plant a seed for the future. I know we're still living in a pandemic time where there's still a lot of restriction when it comes to gathering and organizing events in person. However, because Dublin is very diverse, and not only diverse as where people come from, but also diversity in language, I just wanted to plant the seed of possibility for the future when we look forward to having in-person events, to consider also having interpreters so that it can reach other community members that may not speak English or may not be able to access communication with this wonderful community liaison, so that they can also have the access of communicating and breaking that barrier of language. So I just wanted to offer that suggestion for the future.
Thank you.
Judge, may I ask a question?
Yes.
Okay. First of all, Officer Nicholson, nice to meet you virtually. Many of you on the screen, I had actually, not knowing that he was going to be on today, reached out earlier this week via email and introduced myself because a Japanese friend of mine forwarded me an email that he had sent to his contacts within the Japanese community and was very appreciative of the proactive outreach. So it is a pleasure to meet you this way. My question for the community liaison officers, obviously, thank you for all that you do. Thank you for all the outreach that is already happening. There are, as you know, as we all know, many, many, many diverse populations in Dublin. Countless events that are happening all the time and countless opportunities to interact with different populations. How are you making decisions on when and where to attend? Is there a strategy around that? Or is there anything that we can do to help you be aware of some key events that you may not be aware of?
Well, I can speak to some of that. Is that this is Corporal Morris, that we rely pretty heavily on Officer Nicholson and Officer McCloskey to provide opportunities for us to engage. But we are open and we are seeking input from this committee for opportunities for either training or opportunities for engagement that we may not have access to or may not even be aware of. So we welcome any thoughts on that you may have.
I'm sorry.
Chief. When we were first getting started, the events we attended were the ones we were invited to. We just, like I said, we kind of put feelers out there, tried to reach out to any groups that we could find, to let them know what we were trying to do. And as we began getting invitations and began meeting people, that's where we went.
Just when we were getting busy enough that we're going to have to start, I guess, being pickier about where we went just for time allotment. That's kind of when COVID hit. So now we've been doing very little. So as things open up, we are dying for things to do, for people to see, and hopefully we'll be able to start hosting our own again as well. Because as many of you know, we hosted Coffee with a Cop events. We did training for new Americans, different types of classes, different types of trainings that we were starting to put on for Chinese, Japanese, Indian communities. So hopefully in the very near future, we can kind of get rolling with that stuff again, and we can get Officer McCloskey out there to meet everybody in person.
Thank you, Officer Nicholson. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to step on you there in that response, but I wanted to just throw out for the committee just a thought that I had, and Isa, I'll ask for your perspective on whether or not this meets with an opportunity that may be in front of us. The body of this committee has brought to us a number of opportunities for us to be aware of events that are happening in Dublin, outside of Dublin, and I just want to offer, as we have the discussion about our community liaison officers, my perspective and support. If that means our officers extending or attending events that are not within the city, it gives us an opportunity to have contact with community members in the central Ohio area. And I think from my perspective, what the committee has helped me understand is that we can have an impact. We can have a support for communities that are outside of the city of Dublin, and there have a resonance for the members of our community that live and work and visit Dublin as well. And so that has been, an excellent broadening of perspective that I would give every credit to the committee members for helping us understand. If there's an opportunity for us, and just considering for us to build a calendar that is part of our review as a committee, that we can plug events into and members of the committee can forward to us, we could keep a sort of running calendar, and that would have better awareness for us. Would be a reminder for us during this meeting to review and consider what events might be upcoming, and give an opportunity for members of the committee to plug in, or for us to plug in. This is an event that's coming up, to give everyone collectively as part of this meeting an awareness of the events that might be occurring. And I just wanted to throw that idea out loud, and certainly willingly offer our resources to help manage that. But it might help bring better collective understanding for everyone, just to be able to touch point with a calendar and see, here's what's upcoming, here's what's annual, here are the events or celebrations we want to highlight as part of our discussions in the future, and to build that resource on our end.
I love that idea, Chief. So would you kind of recommend that we send the events over to the office, or would that be like a common and a better gatekeeping opportunity, or do you want the committee to kind of handle that?
You all have enough on your plate. I'm just grateful that you're willing to spend the amount of time you spend with us each month and have the continual communication in between meetings. I am not tech savvy enough to know exactly how we would go about that, but if there is support and interest from members of the committee, I would certainly be willing on our end to figure out the right people we could bring into the room to help us bring that resource together for future consideration for the committee.
I have a few ideas, Chief, so I would be happy to help with it for everybody. Thank you.
You certainly have my support.
Great discussion, guys. Thank you.
Just to give everyone kind of an idea of stuff we've attended before things shut down, several different events at the Islamic Center there in Hilliard that Imran helped with, Chinese festivals, India Fest. We've gone there just about every year we could. Officer Brown and I actually participated in a big table discussion with, I believe it was hosted by Zed Digital, as far as modality in Central Ohio. They invited us there as kind of to get perspective from an enforcement and traffic safety, public safety, as they discussed ways to, I guess, enhance different types of modalities throughout Columbus a couple years ago. So we're very willing, and we've had department support definitely to leave town and to visit our surrounding neighborhoods, to attend things, to help run things. And we don't limit ourselves just to, festivals or events. We're very eager to be involved in planning, to be involved in organization. We just consulted kind of briefly with Bexley about a Asian community event they're having over there in a few weeks. So we don't limit ourselves. And so if you think there's something we could be useful for, that we could learn from, don't limit yourself and the options. Send it out. The worst we can say is that we're unable to because of, and if we do, that's going to be because of scheduling. It's not ever going to be because we don't want to attend.
Officer Nicholson, just to add on to that long list, remember we actually organized almost a tour to the Chinese community, and we used both language for our flyers, and the community really appreciate that. And I shared during this event, like the current event, I said, when it's open, we can talk about that again, to get to know each other, to tour the facility. And so that's something that we can certainly plan together.
Well, I want to thank Lieutenant Tabernick and Corporal Morris and Officer Nicholson and Officer McCloskey for joining us tonight and presenting on the Community Liaison Officer Program. The last piece I'll offer as part of this discussion is, again, we are still building portions of this program. We certainly are hopeful to have more officers join that assignment this year and continue to build upon that. If there are recommendations or suggestions, much like with the School Resource Officer Program, for how we can develop and grow it, just as Officer Nicholson offered, who has been the longest member with the assignment, we are certainly more than eager to have the committee members offer us those recommendations and to figure out how we build further connectivities. So thank you again for the officers for sharing perspective tonight.
Yeah,
Judge,
much appreciated. Thank you.
Judge, I know we have a current events section to get into, so I'll be mindful of the amount of time we're going to take, but we do want to make sure that we answer what was one of the requests for policy discussion in our previous meetings. And so I know Corporal Dalgord has been waiting, I'm certain, anxiously and patiently to present on our body camera overview. And so I will, if you're amenable to it, turn it over to Corporal Dalgord, and we'll move into that portion of the meeting.
I had one question I'd like to ask Ajmiri and Esau, and it has to do with the meeting that we did have with leadership of the task force. And if you think that this would be a good time to have any comments about that meeting and what we have going forward, or do you think that it would be better to hear the presentation and then just touch on that before we get into the other current event topics that we have listed? Ajmiri, Esau, either of you a thought on this?
I think we can just touch on it after the presentation. I think that we can also go into it in more detail if necessary, just offline as well.
Okay. Chief and okay, Esau, I'm sorry, any input?
No, I'll defer to Ajmiri in your judgment.
Okay. Chief, could you just share with us before we leave the update section, the date the council meeting when it's anticipated that we would have a report or some sort of report to them?
Yes, thank you for the reminder, Judge. So I had a conversation just a couple of days ago with Judge Maynard. I was able to talk to the city manager and reconcile the date that he intends to have an update from the community task force presented to city council. That date is May 10th at the city council meeting. So we have some time between now and then for us to work on our memorandum to city council to give an update on our progress and connectivity for the members of the advisory committee. And so Rebecca Myers and I are working on that memo. We've also working closely with the city manager's office to make sure that that information matches and we can present both reports of progress to council on the same council meeting. So May 10th.
Okay, thank you. Everybody put that on your calendar. All right, Chief, if you're going to go ahead with the body-worn cameras presentation, that would be great.
Thank you, Judge. So you have seen Corporal Jace Dalgore before. We actually highlighted him during our last meeting as our Leadership Award winner for 2020. And Corporal Dalgore has been over our body-worn camera program for the last little over a year now. And so we'll turn it over to him to give an overview of our program and then open up to any questions you might have about our current program.
Jace, unfortunately, we're not getting audio from you.
Judge, while we work through the audio issues on our end, we can revisit this presentation towards the end of the meeting. And so I would offer, if this is space you would like to open up discussion for current events, we can work through that on our end and then use the time that we have available towards the end of the meeting to work through the at least PowerPoint slides today, and then come back and revisit the conversation and questions later. Or if we have time, we can get through the entirety of the presentation and question at the end of the meeting if we'd like to move into the next section of our agenda.
All right. That's fine. We'll move into what we're calling new business and current events at this time. I'd like just to touch on this Beaverton plan scenario with the community partners and then move into the deeper discussion. For the committee as a whole, on the 13th of April, Ajmiri, I told you this in my email, but Ajmiri and I, the chief, were able to have a meeting with the leadership of the task force, which included the city manager and the chair and vice chair of the task force. And that was all facilitated by ESAL, and publicly I'll say thank you to ESAL for that now. And all of us were part of the discussion. And from my vantage point, what came out of that discussion was that the task force recognized that on the issue of public safety, it was probably an area that the Chiefs Advisory Committee could give valuable input and recommendations to the city council about on that subject matter. And their concerns seem to be that we come up potentially with what they call aspirational goals and action items. based on the model that we see in the Beaverton plan. So in the areas of public safety, there were 5 areas identified: reflective police force, or having a reflective police force, having a culturally responsive public safety staff, uh, community engagement, transparency, and safety for vulnerable communities, which entailed identifying what are the vulnerable communities within our community within Dublin. And if you really look at that model, there are a number of things that we are already doing as a committee in our discussions, and talking about ways to do more of it um, through the department. So my thought is that we can have discussions offline, and this is not something that we have to spend a lot of time on now, recognizing that on the memo that's being prepared for May 10th, it's just going to be more of an overview, and it gives us an opportunity to take the time to talk about these 5 areas in more depth during other meetings, and then recognize that we probably are going to do the public safety portion of the plan that the task force submits to council as part of the work that we do, and recognize that we haven't worked out the specifics about what our own final report will look like to council, but certainly there will be in my estimation at this point, a lot of overlap, and I don't think that we'll be stretched further than we already are in being able to help the task force and do the things that we're already doing. So that's my thought. That's what I wanted to share. Ajmiri, if there's something more or different that you want to interject, that's fine. And then Esau and or the chief, if there's more that you want to interject, that's fine as well.
I think that was a pretty comprehensive overview of what we went through, so I don't have anything to add. Thank you.
Esau?
I echo Ajmiri, Judge.
Chief?
The only thing I would offer in addition, as always, is that we on our end will be all the support that is necessary to make sure we help accomplish that goal of returning information and recommendations to the task force as part of their overall report. So whatever we can do to facilitate and make it easy on the members of the committee in providing that information, we are here to help make sure we do our part.
And as always, we're appreciative of that, Chief. So thank you. We'll move into the next part of current events or new business and current events, and this was an area that I thought was important to allow the space for community advisory committee persons to talk about how, well, first it was how they felt in the aftermath of the Derek Chauvin trial and the verdict that was reached by the jury just a couple of days ago. And then, we had new officer involved shootings between the time period. Well, there was one young man who was shot by law enforcement on April 11th. That's Dante Wright. And then we had two shootings on Wednesday, the 21st of April, one day removed from the verdict in the trial. And so current events became a broader category, and the possibility of discussion on not only the trial, but the fact that we still have these incidents that are occurring was something that I thought was important, and others have echoed that they thought was important to be able to discuss during or in this space and during this meeting. So I would defer to anyone who would like to speak on either topic or both topics before I offer some of my own thoughts.
As an educator, I'm gonna wear that hat right now as I speak these words. The work of an educator is to serve our students, and it has been a very difficult year. Just with the pandemic itself has provided all kinds of challenges. But watching youth, and I'm sorry that I'm having such a hard time finding the right words. That's usually not a challenge I have, but it's been very emotional. It's been very emotional to walk through the hallways of our school. It's been very emotional to be in the presence of kids that are afraid and wonder. And I want to, first of all, honor the life of this beautiful 15-year-old girl who should have not have died. In the way that things happened and how my mind spins trying to find an understanding, and there isn't any, because she trusted the police for help. She reached out, she called to ask for help. And I try not to watch too many of these videos to honor the person's life and the family. But I had to watch what happened on Tuesday. And everything moved so fast, there was no de-escalation of the challenge, the situation that this group of girls were in. And all I keep thinking is, in my head, in the last 48 hours, I keep thinking she trusted in the system to help her and protect her, and we fail her. So when I think about systems, I also think about the educational system. And so I'm sitting with this reflection and the responsibility for us as people who work and serve the community. And I'm sitting with myself as an educator asking, in how many other ways are we failing our youth? And how, with their innocence, they believe in us that we will protect them. So I just wanted to share that out loud. It's been very, very, very heavy in our school systems. Our children are our most precious. We don't do this job if it's not for them. So Without them, there is no mission in life. So I just wanted to say, from an educator point of view, how we have been wrestling with this in school, how we've been holding space with conversation among ourselves as educators, with under this big umbrella of how are we protecting our children when they believe that we are there to protect them. Thank you.
Stella.
Judge, I would like to add some comments. Stella, what you mentioned is so powerful and emotional. But what I want to share is my own family's experience. My two kids joined the protest yesterday at OSU campus. They marched to the State House. I think on the way, what I was discussing with my child is more about how much force we can use on the children. I understand at 16 years old, it could be closer to adult, but is it necessary to use that much of a force, even if in that scenario, in this case, we are still waiting for evidence being gathered. Just in general, I would like to personally understand how much force we're using, what kind of guideline the police force will follow. I understand in certain scenarios, you have only a split of a millisecond to make a decision, but I hope that we make a decision that's all valid. Thank you.
Thank you, Yanley.
I want to add a few words. Just on Tuesday, as we were waiting for the verdict, I was having a hard time just sitting. I don't know about the rest of you, and waiting. This is cliche now, but like I was trying to take deep, heavy breaths and just trying to calm down, because if it was any other way, it would be devastating. I mean, the trauma the community faces over and over again for these decisions. And this was a unique decision. We all have to acknowledge that. That was not something that, quite frankly, I expected. I expected it to be not guilty based on how Minnesota has handled prior cases. So there was a large relief that I felt after I heard the verdict. However, that didn't last long, because then we had the incident with Makia, and it has been very hard. I've told you guys all before, I work in the juvenile system. I do have a lot of cases there, and it has been difficult, because what do I tell my kids who know her? What do I tell them? What do I tell the kids that don't even know her but knew of her? Because anybody who's been in the foster care system, people know each other. It's very easy to know each other. And I saw the video. I understand it was a split-second decision. I just know that foster families, counselors, schools, they break up fights with multiple weapons involved, and no one dies. And that is something that I am grappling with, because this happened in our community. And quite frankly, what was even more horrifying was the video of the officers who were barricading the area. And one of them said, "Blue Lives Matter." So the neighborhood where this happened, to the people who witnessed this death. And I am worried about our mutual aid agreements with CPD and CPD officers coming into Dublin, because obviously the Dublin Police Department culture does not match the CPD culture, because that officer felt like he could get away with it. He could say it and he would not be punished, and there would be no repercussions for him. And from my discussions with all the officers that I've met, and virtually and in person, I don't believe that's the type of culture that you're building in Dublin Police Department, where somebody would be so callous to the people who just witnessed something so devastating. And I am genuinely worried about what would happen if CPD officers came into our neighborhoods, because we have a very diverse community here. And it is not Columbus, but they don't know our community. You guys know our community because you guys live here. So many of our officers live in Dublin. And it's something that I have been thinking about a lot, is what would happen if we had to have their involvement in anything in Dublin. And it worries me. It really does. So those are just some of the things I wanted to add. I am sad for my kids who are in foster care. It really is just a really sad situation. So that's all.
Thank you, Ajmiri.
Judge, I would like to just add a few more comments to that. It was very painful, definitely, this week. As Mary mentioned, we were waiting for the verdict, and surprisingly, it came guilty, which was a relief. But then the next day, we had a 15-year-old in our own backyard, in our own community, losing her life. Every day, as a faith leader, as a community member, as a cultural partner, when I get up, I intend to do things that will bring our communities together and build our relationships and build those conduits into every segment of our community in Central Ohio. And again, I do that for my own purpose as well as for communal purpose. My own purpose is definitely I want to live a life according to my parents' legacy, and then also leave the world a better place for my children and also for the community at large. But when events like these happen, it seems like we are taking one step forward and 10 steps backward. It just makes our task a little bit more daunting and difficult. But I also like to see the glass half full. I feel like in events like these, which exposes our weaknesses, that's definitely an opportunity for us to convert our weaknesses to our strengths. And the only way forward is, as the department is doing, as our communities is doing, as our leadership is doing in the city of Dublin, is moving forward with the momentum of outreach and inclusivity. If we can keep that momentum at bay, I'm pretty sure then, we can keep Dublin safe, and then also be contagious in making other communities around us, safe as well. So that's my hope. Again, as I said, I like to see the glass half full. So.
You, Imran.
Judge, would it be all right if I shared a couple thoughts?
Yes, absolutely, Susan.
Thank you. As all of us, I think we're all still trying to figure out exactly what we all think and feel about everything for the last forever. And as you can tell, I appreciate Stella saying she's trying to find the words, because I obviously am too. In line with what Stella was sharing and thinking about systems, so some of my reaction on a professional level is each of us works in so many different systems, and we have so much ability to change those systems from the inside, and that also gives me hope. There's so many variables when we talk about the need for systemic change, be it education, foster care, whatever it is. And so I continue to cling to that. And I know for some it can be a different sort of experience when there is loss of life of someone so young. But I continue to remind myself that it doesn't matter what age anyone is when they do pass away or their life is taken from them. They will always be someone's baby. And so that's something that I think hits pretty close. In line with what Imran was saying about the hope, I do have hope. I have hope that we can continue to have a society and a community, especially in Dublin, that this might sound funny, but that is turned on its side so much that it's ready for change, that it feels thrown off kilter just enough that people are saying we're done. We're done with how things have always been. We want to continue to make them different. On a personal level, yes, I was pleased with the verdict. It's been a weird kind of experience. I don't know if I've shared this with everybody in the committee. I'm originally from Minnesota and spent the majority of my adult life before coming to Ohio living in Minneapolis, living in the communities, walking the streets with colleagues and friends of the communities that are now spread across the media regularly. And while I am extremely cognizant that my personal experience will never be the same of that as my friends and family and colleagues who are people of color, I continue to try to reconcile my own experience with my own concerns about my family and those who are people of color, and the fact that I am concerned about, will they be in a similar experience because of their appearance? Do I have to worry when they leave the house because of what they look like? And so I have lots of thoughts and feelings, but I do have hope, especially for what's been progressing with this committee as well. So that's what I've got.
Thank you, Susan.
I would also like to add, I'm so grateful for this committee, for this work. I am so grateful for the conversations and the opportunity to come together and discuss things that are so important, because the police department is a system in our society. And as we move forward with our decision, one thing that I am going to ask is that we keep in mind the lived experiences of our youth and what they're witnessing, what they're seeing in their short years of life. They have witnessed more things, more horrific events than I have in my age. And as adults that make decisions that affects children and youth, I'm just going to request that we really consider this, what our children, our youth are witnessing as we move forward, and we talk about what training, what awareness, trauma-informed care conversations that we need to have, because more is being added to the live experience, sadly, every week. And when it comes to trauma, the body keeps the score. So we don't know when this is going to show up or how is this going to show up in the future. But as responsible adults that we are in this committee, I just ask that we keep this in mind, their lived experiences, and we keep thinking about what do we need moving forward, what systems do we need in place, what training, what conversations we need to have, because these are things that we can't erase. We cannot, they're not unseen anymore. So that's my request. Thank you.
I do want to add to that as well, Stella, about what the children are experiencing, and they're experiencing narrative, how they will be perceived if something like that happens. If their worst 10 seconds of their life is played out on a body cam video, how the media, how the public will paint them, because the dehumanizing things that I have been hearing from people, because this child was in foster care or because this child was attacking someone or anything. It's just that is horrifying, because we have judged her entire life based on those 10 seconds. And now people are putting up TikTok videos of her doing her hair And I see those videos and it reminds me of my daughter's videos, and it's extremely hard. And I'm so horrified at how people have reacted to this.
Judge, can I say a couple of things?
Absolutely.
So like everybody else, I also struggle to really figure out how I am processing this, what I'm feeling, and what I'm trying to express. But like Imran said, I would like to look at what is possible because of this opportunity that we have here together. As Stella said, we can't erase what's already happened. And all we can do is to make sure that this doesn't happen again. Certainly not in Dublin. I suppose as long as we're talking about the Dublin Police Department and what the DPD does within the city proper of Dublin, there is a limited influence we can have on what CPD does or other agencies do. But we can talk about what happens here in Dublin. And I am thankful that we have this forum where we can come to each other and use this opportunity to understand each other. I'm making an assumption here, but I have got to think, for those of you who do wear the uniform, you must have thought what you would have done if you were there. You must have thought how you would have reacted if you were the first officer at the scene and you would have gotten out of the cruiser to witness that scene. And that is not something I'm even going to pretend to understand, because I am not in that role. I don't have the training. I don't have the experience to draw on. But what I do have is this opportunity to really understand your side. I think you have heard a lot about what we, the citizens, are feeling, or what we think we're trying to express. I would be very much interested in hearing what thoughts and feelings go through your side. As officers who wear the uniform, what are you thinking? What are you feeling? I would love to hear that so that we can better understand and hopefully reach something that is constructive that comes out of this forum to influence what happens in Dublin going forward.
So this is Corporal Howard. I would like to take the chance to respond to that because I too, like everybody on the committee and a lot of officers, have been thinking and reflecting about this, and we've, watched the video probably, a couple dozen times, breaking the video down frame by frame and asking those same questions. What would we do in that situation when you're talking about making a decision in a split second? I think that any loss of life is tragic, especially the loss of a juvenile. And I feel terrible for the family of Makia. I really do. I don't think that there's a police officer out there who doesn't feel terrible for what her family has to suffer with and go through. It's important to remember that a life was also saved on Tuesday. And it's important to understand what that victim and her family were going through as a victim of a violent crime. I can't imagine what it would be like as a victim to be attacked like that and have somebody to confront me and start charging towards me with a knife. I don't know what that perspective is like. Luckily, I've never been in that situation. As a police officer, using lethal force is something that we don't take lightly. I mean, it is something that for most officers will never happen in their career. And if it does, it will be a life-changing event. But unfortunately, sometimes lethal force, as sad as the outcome may be, is necessary to save a life. And as long as our officers keep that mindset that lethal force is the absolute last case scenario, and they use that only when they absolutely have to in order to save a life, then I think it's important to realize that that decision that that officer comes to is as I said earlier, is a life changing decision, and it will affect that officer. It will affect the person who the lethal force was applied to, and all the other people, including the community. It's going to affect them too. And we have to think about all those components and all that information within a quarter of a second. And it's a very, very difficult thing to do.
Thank you for pointing that out.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you, Corporal. I think am I the last one then? From the
Judge, can I say something in response to what the corporal shared?
Yes.
Just really quickly, I think that is important to remember, but I also think that's another area of hope for us in our work with the committee, because officers are unfortunately put in those split-second decisions, and they have to make the decision in order to preserve life. The work that the committee does in building those relationships across the community, I think, does the preventative end of things, building those relationships, doing that preventative work to say officers aren't just here to, be the heavy. It's somebody you can reach out to when something isn't going well, when you start to get into a situation where you don't know how to manage it and de-escalate it on your own, so that it can be, instead it can be a call to 911 or whatever. Hey, I need help. I need you to help with this situation. And so that officers can then have the opportunity to come and de-escalate and support, rather than walking into a situation where they literally just have to decide and rely on training. I think that is an extremely important part of this committee and helping the department to have those relationships with the community.
Yeah, I agree. Prevention is incredibly important. In fact, prevention is one of the most important things that we do. Responding to crimes is secondary to preventing situations from happening in the first place. And I agree with you that getting the chance to participate in this committee and getting the chance to hear everybody's input and everybody's opinion goes into, learning about these kinds of things and about these situations, learning about people in crisis and how we can better manage situations with people in crisis, and ultimately make us better at preventing these situations in the first place, because that's the outcome, that's the goal, that's what we're trying to do.
All of this discussion is great and very important, and it's interesting because it kind of changes the focus that I had when I thought about these two subjects, the Derek Chauvin verdict and the current events. For me, the Derek Chauvin verdict represented a major amount of relief, because I have been a part of the system, to use you guys' terminology, and I have been and continue to be a believer in our criminal justice system. And so, in many ways, the verdict that was reached by the jury in the Derek Chauvin case was a reaffirmation for me in the system, and that that in this instance, justice was served. I recognized in the course of the trial itself that the government, the prosecutors, the prosecution team crossed all the T's and dotted all the I's and was well prepared to present its case and counter the arguments that the defense might make. I was pleasantly surprised. No, I won't say that. I was pleasantly pleased that as many law enforcement officers, law enforcement professionals stepped forward and testified that what then Officer Chauvin did was not consistent with training, was not consistent with policy, and in essence was wrong. I was pleased to see civilian witnesses and expert witnesses come forward, and obviously they had been well prepped either by the attorneys that were involved in the case or the victims advocates that were involved in the case to not get thrown off by the questions that the defense might pose, because when you stay with the facts, what happened to George Floyd should not have happened last May. And then I was pleased with the jury's verdict in the sense that they did not deliberate for a long period of time, that they had paid attention to what had been presented and went back and did their due diligence and looking at those instructions from the court and rendered a verdict that I felt allowed us a degree of guarded optimism, that maybe we were turning a corner, and that the type of what I consider to be inhumane treatment that George Floyd encountered was something that our society was not going to tolerate anymore. The unfortunate shooting of young Miss Bryant, I'm happy that we've had the kind of conversations that we've had in this committee, because some things that Susan has said, just in terms of understanding that there's trauma that officers encounter as well as victims encounter, led me to say in the aftermath of that young lady's shooting and death, that's something that officer is going to have to live with for the rest of his life. And it's interesting, Corporal Howard, that you mentioned that deadly force is not, I don't even think that for most officers there are that many occasions when they pull out their weapon, let alone discharge it. And then to recognize that this officer, who was, I think they've said that he was a year or two on the force, had to have that experience and had to have that outcome. Certainly the point that you make about him, that there was a life that was saved out of that, is important, but we also have to recognize that his life has changed. His life as an officer has changed, and um, so I feel bad. I feel bad for the officer as well, because no, I'm sure that when he took his oath to serve and protect, he didn't think about the protection part, meaning that he might have to take somebody. He might have. You can argue about had to or not, but he'd be in a situation where within um, 10 to 15 seconds he had to make a determination to use deadly force. Is I'm sure there are questions that are asked about that, as you're going through the process of interviewing and potentially being hired. But it's certainly an unfortunate circumstance that that's where he found himself, and that this is something that this early on in his career, something that he'll have to carry with him as well. So I appreciate the fact that in our discussions we're able to have the opportunity to look at things from many different perspectives and have empathy for not for all persons involved in situations like the one that happened yesterday. So that's what I have to offer.
Judge, if you don't mind me jumping in here at the end, I just, I thank everybody again for their thoughtful comments. And we've said from the beginning that there are periods of time and occasions and instances where we're going to sit together and have very difficult conversation. And that's, that's certainly highlighted today with so much that has occurred just in the last month since we've been together, and how much pain and trauma have occurred that, as so many have pointed out, we are all constantly aware of, exposed to, and carrying then forward with us, as part of these conversations and as part of our everyday life. And I am very appreciative and grateful for so many reasons for this group, but not the least of which is the ability for us to come together and have open and honest conversation with each other. There are things that we cannot go back in time and change, although we would all want to. And there are realities from our history in this country that we certainly are collectively as a nation struggling to reconcile and learn from and grow from. And what I wanted to offer as reflection just in hearing this conversation tonight is an absolute gratitude for everyone who is here and part of this meeting and who has been part of these discussions. From a personal perspective, you've helped me grow and open and learn and empathize in a way that I hope takes us to a place where we find a future where we can avoid tragic outcomes in every direction. Officer Howard offered a little perspective of what it's like from an officer, and I think Esau asked, we've all certainly been thinking through what would we do in situations, and one of the truths about working in this profession is there isn't really a way to prepare you for all the things you're going to experience over the course of a career. You can learn from the experience and exposure to events that other officers have had to go through, and other community members have gone through, and you watch video, and it's one of the hardest parts about this profession is watching a video and having to see that situation through with other people's decisions, and something you can't change the trajectory of, and then watching it over and over and over again as an officer, trying to prepare yourself and think through what would I do? What would I do differently? How would I react? And then what would my life be like after? And in a lot of ways, our conversation, and Stella, thank you for talking and saying out as well about the trauma that everyone is experiencing in watching these events play out not just once, but over and over and over again. And in a lot of ways, what everyone has expressed, I also felt as relief in the verdict in the trial this week, in that the right verdict was reached and arrived. And I'm very grateful for the judge and for the prosecutor and the witnesses and the jurors in doing what was a very difficult job with the world watching. And what we witnessed in George Floyd's death was not police work. That was it was a crime. It was murder. And to see justice in at least the respect of acknowledgement by our system that this is somebody who is being held accountable for that action was a relief. And it also reminds me of how much work we have to do, in that everyone felt relief for something that was so clear for so many of us from the moment we witnessed that video the first time. But I am grateful for this group coming together and helping each other, not just the direction of the community police relationship, but helping each other as individuals grow from our thoughts and feelings and perspectives. I know there is so much work to do. You certainly have willing partners, on this end. I hope you hear and see that each and every time we come together. But I am grateful for the opportunity for us to sit in difficult consideration and contemplation and conversation about how we find a better community and partnership and protection and service from what should be trusted resources in all of our communities across this country. We know we are building a bridge and building trust perpetually. Having intentional conversation as we've had today is how we will make sure that it is not just surface comfort that you have with your resources here in our community and communities across this country. So thank you again for the opportunity to have this conversation tonight.
Yeah, thank you, Chief. And to given the hour, I don't even think, and what people have shared, I don't think that there's much that we could garner as a group out of the presentation on body worn cameras tonight. I think that we're going to continue to do the work, and we're going to continue to have the hard conversations. And I think that when we come up with our report and recommendations, that that council, well, I'll say that we as a group, a CAC, all of us that are involved, will know that we put in time and we've offered perspective, and that the recommendations that we offer are ones that have been well thought out and thoroughly discussed in many cases. So I really appreciate all of you all, police department personnel, and the folks I call my community partners on this committee. Unless there's somebody else that wants to weigh in, I'd be inclined to entertain a motion for us to adjourn tonight.
I move to adjourn.
Would there be a second?
I second.
We have a proper motion and acceptance of the motion. All in favor, if you would say aye.
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 Thank you. And anyone who's opposed? Be safe, stay vigilant, and stay hopeful. Tonight's meeting is adjourned.